With Hu Tao's return to Genshin Raid of Banners after an extended vacation, and the advent of a new elemental reaction that benefits from crit stats but is fundamentally different from previous reactions, it seems like a good time to take a look at that wild card artifact slot that is the Sands. Flowers and feathers, they're always the same. If you're building crit, generally seems like a good idea to go for a crit circlet and goblet. Damage percent, please, Hoyo, I beg you. But the Sands, that can be a bit tougher. I'm Souldapop, and if this is your first time here, hopefully after watching this video, you'll have a better idea of which main stat to look out for this particular artifact piece. Generally speaking, the first thing you need to ask when trying to decide what kind of Sands you need is going to be, is my character reliant on their burst? And if yes, the second question you should ask is, do I need more energy in order to use their burst? If you answered yes to both of these questions, you may just want to consider an energy recharge stance. Yes, you may not get the big numbers you see in the thumbnails of your favorite content creators because you're sacrificing offensive stats in that artifact slot. But if the character is reliant on their burst to do damage at all, your damage becomes effectively zero if you can't use their burst, regardless of how many offensive stats you pumped into them. Most characters can have their energy issues met with various energy recharge weapons, in particular Favonius weapons, or by running them with another character that can funnel them energy and or elemental particles. However, in the cases where this isn't enough, you may just want to bite the bullet and go with an energy recharge stance. This more often than not depends on your team comp and weapon choices. If you find that your burst reliant character is meeting their needs without extra energy, then it's normally going to be better use of your sand slot to focus on more offensive stats. Now, your energy needs are met, and you've concluded that you don't need an energy recharge stance. Good for you. Now what? Now, it's time to talk about the difference between multiplicative, additive, and transformative reactions. Though it is extremely helpful to understand how damage is calculated in Genshin, it can be a little overwhelming, so instead I'll try to give a more approachable explanation for each of these reactions. We'll start with the simplest, transformative. These include, but are not limited to, reactions like Hyperbloom, Swirl, and Electrocharged. Unlike the other reactions, these reactions don't care about the damage of the attack that caused the reaction. All they care about is elemental mastery. If you're building a character whose primary role is to cause transformative reactions, and their own damage doesn't matter as much, your best bet is to just give them an EM Sands. Next, we'll head into the more complicated reactions. Multiplicative reactions like Vaporize and Melt may seem a little complicated, to use the word again, but it basically boils down to one number, your base damage, being multiplied by another number, the reaction. Because of this, it's important to invest in stats that modify both values in the equation. For simplicity's sake, let's equate both your base damage and the reaction to 1. You have 2 points to invest. How do you invest those 2 points to get the largest number? Well, if you put both of those points into the base damage, 3 times 1 equals 3. If you invest both points into the reaction, 1 times 3 also equals 3. But if you invest 1 point into both sides and multiply them together, 2 times 2 equals 4, which is bigger than 3. So even though it might seem great to get one big stat, The other one remaining low stat results in having a lower number once the two of them are multiplied together. Now that we understand this, we can take a look at our characters and determine if our characters are over or under invested into a certain stat, and choose the stat that makes up the difference. Is your Hu Tao on Dragon's Bane and is already benefiting from that juicy 221 Elemental Mastery? It's probably better to run an HP Sans. Are they on Homa with that thick HP boost without much EM from substats? If that's the case, balance that equation with an EM Sans. Generally speaking, the question of which Sans to run for multiplicative reactions comes down to asking yourself, have I invested too much into base stats and neglected EM? If you have more than enough of one stat and not enough of another, go ahead and throw on the Sans that gives you the more neglected stat. For Hu Tao in particular, most of the time, that's going to be EM. You'll normally want to have between 200 400 EM on carries that trigger multiplicative reactions, not considering external buffs. If you're hovering around 100 or less, you've probably invested too much into the base stats. And if you're at 500 or more, you may not have invested enough into the base stats. Lastly, let's take a look at additive reactions like spread and aggravate. Instead of multiplying damages together, additive reactions add them to one another. This makes things significantly less complicated. If we take a look at our example from before, where the base damage and the reaction damage are both represented by 1, with 2 points to invest either way, it matters a lot less where those investments go. 1 plus 3, 3 plus 1, and 2 plus 2 all equal 4. So, for characters like Kaching, who don't have EM scaling, attack and EM Sans are basically interchangeable. But what about split scaling characters like Nahida and Alhaitham? Well, in their cases, their base damage and reaction damage scale off EM. So, giving them an EM Sans is like having a cheat code that copies your investment into the reaction damage and pastes it into the base damage. If you made it this far, thanks for hanging out. Hopefully you walk away from this video with a better understanding of how to choose the right Sans for your character. If you found this video helpful, hitting the subscribe button or following me on Twitch at twitch.tv/Souldapop, I stream every day, would help motivate me to make more videos breaking down things in Genshin. If you have any ideas for concepts that I could try to simplify, please let me know in the comments. And one more thing for reactions, 300 EM is the amount you need to balance the EM multiplier at 1x for all reactions. Before 300, the multiplier is literally a decimal. It's not the be all end all, but if you've ever run less than 100 EM and thought your vapes and melts weren't really doing much for your damage, that's why. More than anything, I just thought it would be cool to share that figure. Finding things like that in math is fun. Anyways, thanks for hanging out.